Rapid but thorough. Those were the words of Josh Harris at the Washington Commanders press conference on Monday. And I opened my podcast with those words instead of my usual hello and welcome to my podcast because of Friday's news that they hired Adam Peters as their new general manager. It's a big deal, folks. I wanted to open it that way, but now that I did, hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in, and you can read my work on ESPN.com. Have a story up now about the Commanders hiring Adam Peters as their general manager on Friday. And again, we've been telling you all along, others have too, that felt this deal would get done within a week, and it certainly has. And it was, again, rapid but thorough. Came down to Peters and Ian Cunningham. And I told you on the previous podcast that I had with Mike Jones that I felt like it would be Peters. That's been, let me say this, that was the feeling in league circles that it would be Peters. And based on what you hear, then you formulate that opinion. I felt like Cunningham was an exceptional candidate. And I think that would have been a good hire as well. But I think Peters, as one person in the league told me who has dealt with these teams for years and years and years, said that Peters was a grand slam hire. So let's get to the news. And again, top two guys, Peters and Cunningham. I don't think there are many jobs that would have lured this guy away from San Francisco. Last year, Tennessee, Arizona tried to get him an interview. He declined. I know that the Raiders and the Chargers were interested in interviewing him, and he's now here. So, and I don't know, like I had heard that he may have had an interview lined up for this weekend with one of those teams. Regardless, that to me was kind of the deadline. Like I didn't think if they wanted Peters, they were going to let him get to another interview. So that's why this makes sense today, because they did interview both Peters and Cunningham again, and they made the decision. And I think certainly Bob Myers, knowing Adam Peters from their time in San Francisco together, with Myers with the Warriors and Peters with the Niners, helped accelerate this process. He's going to, a couple of little nuts and bolts here. Peters will be the general manager, not a president of football operations. The titles are somewhat irrelevant. The bottom line is Peters is the lead football executive under new owner Josh Harris. So anything comes beneath him. That's why, like a guy like Ian Cunningham, the question was, what would they hire? One is a president of football ops and the other is a GM. It wouldn't have mattered because it would still be Peters, a lead executive. And a guy like Cunningham would essentially be going to the same role he has in Chicago as an assistant general manager. So anyway, right now, what Peters has to do is decide is how does he want to set up the rest of the front office? He worked with with general manager Martin Mayhew, who is no longer the GM because that job now belongs to Peters, but they worked together in San Francisco for 4 years. So it's going to depend. Before this, I didn't think that Martin was going to stay because that was what, that was certainly the buzz and the general feel. But the fact that they've worked together, how will that play into this? And I don't know that just yet. It really obviously depends on what they had, what kind of relationship they had, and what kind of role he would see for Martin Mayhew and the rest of the front office. But that is a to be determined. But again, no title for president of football ops. And I asked somebody about it and said, well, that was just something that others were saying, but it was kind of a way they brought it up. And the way that Josh Harris set up at his other organizations, they did have a head of, they had the president of basketball operations, the president of hockey operations, whatever. So bottom line, though, is Peters is the top executive here, and that's why he is coming to Washington. So that's one thing. Now we turn to what does he have to do? Again, setting up the front office is going to be key. How he, who he wants to retain, if anybody. A lot of that group was hired by Ron Rivera, of course. Martin Mayhew and Marty Herney both were hired by Rivera. Eric Stokes by Rivera, Chris Polian. So a lot of those guys in front office, they were tied to Rivera. Does he want to keep them? Any of them, all of them, whatever. That will be decided. Now it's the coach search. So they've already interviewed virtually Anthony Weaver, who's the associate head coach with the Ravens defense and coach the defensive line. People wondering, like, how can you do that without having the guy in charge? First of all, take a deep breath and relax. This is a preliminary interview. the big heavy lifting for the interviews will always take place after the virtual interviews. But you're an organization that had a chance to interview with some guys this week, Weaver and Mike McDonald included, that why not take advantage of that? But it's just a, hey, let's get to know him situation. All the stuff will be now, all the heavy lifting for that job will be coming now that you have your guy in place. But again, it's, so people who are kind of get bent out of shape, like, how could they do this without these guys? Who's in it? It's a leadership group, man. It's the same people hiring these executives. So, but Peters will have a major role in what happens with that coaching hire. So they still have to, like, they can't talk to the other guys virtually, the other 5, until 3 days after the wild card game. So that's Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Raheem Morris, Dan Quinn. Those are the other guys on the initial list. It's quite possible that Peters may want to talk to 1 or 2 other people instead of just the guys on that list. But again, you can first do it virtually. It's a getting to know somebody. The in-person interviews will be key, and that can't happen until January 2nd or later. So just understand that, but he will have a big role in that. They were never going to hire a coach without getting this guy in place, but we always knew that this guy would be in place right away. So a couple things you need to know, like, this guy's been involved in the league for a long time. He was a scout for 11 years with New England, and then he went to Denver with Josh McDaniels. So he was a scout for 11 years, worked his way up, was an assistant director of college scouting with the Broncos, became the director of college scouting with the Broncos before joining the 49ers front office with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. Now, that's key because when Lynch and Shanahan went to the 49ers, neither had experience in the role they were being hired for. That's why, and I know Kyle was told by people close to him, you need to get a guy who has that kind of experience, who can help set up and do the player eval, et cetera, right away. And that guy was Adam Peters. So he had a key role in helping to, basically the evaluations and all that and setting things up. He's had a big role behind the scenes. That's why people felt like he was ready for this job. And his evaluation skills are why a lot of people felt like he would be a very good hire for anybody. The other thing is I had, but again, he was key to building that roster in San Francisco, which is really a really strong roster, strong enough that you could drop a guy like Brock Purdy in there and have him do very, very well. So the other part is, I had someone in the league who knows him very well tell me that, and he goes, he doesn't always agree with Adam on everything, but he likes he loves dealing with him and the 49ers front office because of how they treat people, because of how the culture, the standard that they have out there. But it's also, he said they're very honest with people, and that is going to be a key here as well. And I think that's very important in this business. The honesty, you don't always get that, but you're getting it out there. So they may not like why a player gets cut or something else, but if you're honest and direct with people, then it softens whatever blows and it allows you to build a professional relationship, something he's done. The other thing is, he told me that players are going to really like him, that the way he treats players and kind of humanizes them, that it matters. So there was one player for the Niners who had a really tough game. He had come up off the practice squad, basically got picked on in the game by the opponent, just like they were attacking him, and it was working very well. He ended up getting benched from the game. Well, the next day, the day after the game, this person gets called thinking like this guy's going to get cut. Peters calls him, thinks he's going to get cut. That's it. Instead, Peters calls him and said, "Hey, I'm just checking on your guy. I want to make sure he's okay. We really love the kid. Just tell him to, hang in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." That stuff goes a long way. Now, could he have cut him? Sure, it would have been justified, but it's just the way he handled it. I think that resonated, and it's why, I think that stuff carries in the locker room. Is that important? I know Scott McCloughan was really liked by players. There were other issues with him here that did not lend itself to success, but in the locker room, players really liked him because of how he dealt with them. And I think, again, it's a little touch like that can help. Again, the key is evaluating players and building a good organization, but those things do trickle down And I think it's also important when you look at how the Niners have built things out there and how you need to build it here. It starts with way more than just player evaluation. It's going to be a lot more. A lot of that's going to be up to Josh Harris, but it's a lot's going to be on Peters helping establish certain standards in the building for that side of the building, certainly. And the other thing is that one person told me that he has a clear vision. Because he's worked in different systems, he has a clear vision of how they want things done. So or how players fit in a scheme. What New England looked for was a little bit different than what Denver looked for, even though they came from New England. Then it's different than what San Francisco was looking for. So the key is, can you evaluate the player to fit that system? And there are times where you may look and say, okay, you like this guy, but does he fit what this team, the team I work for wants to do? And if not, then you move on. And so that's very important. You're going to miss on guys. Everybody misses on guys. Every single GM, the best in history, missed on guys. Bobby Beathard missed on people. Joe Gibbs would make a mistake on some people. They all do, because you're dealing with humans. But if you take a certain approach over time, again, same with Harris, you take the right approach over time, then it has a chance for success. So this is the first step. The next step, again, is the coach. I know there's a lot of talk about a Adam Peters, Ben Johnson pairing. Maybe that happens. I would say slow your roll a little bit with that, because you need to go through the process. What if Ben Johnson gets here and he finds out he may not have a say in the way the roster is constructed, because everybody's going to be like, who's going to get say over the 53? That's a big deal. So those kind of discussions will be what happens during the interviews. But if Ben Johnson hears something here, is that looks like a good situation, but maybe not the best for me. That could happen. Now, it could also happen that he says, hey, I want to be there. That could also happen. But I would just say, do not assume anything based on anything that's out there at this point, because there's a long way to go. He hasn't even talked to anybody here at this point. It does help that Rick Spielman's brother, Chris, works for the Lions, clearly knows a lot about Ben Johnson, and maybe he is the guy, and he'd be a really good hire based on everything I've heard. But what if the Commanders get into the interview process and really like candidate X? What if it's Bobby Slowick, Raheem Morris, Mike McDonald, one of those guys, any of them? They're going to talk to a few. What if they prefer that over this? So just, it could be. So I think what you have to do now is you're going to have to put your trust in this guy, Adam Peters. That's what the Commanders are doing as well. So big news today. There you go. I'll be back maybe this weekend, maybe if at the latest Monday morning, with more on the Adam Peters, more on what's looking forward for the Commanders. So I'll talk to you next time.